There's only background noise now. Engines, airflow, distant systems. Nothing sharp or demanding. The story unfolds slowly, leaving space for your thoughts to fade. I remember the way the wind vanished. On the surface, the air had teeth, a constant horizontal knife of ice that scraped across armor and found every weak seal. It roared across the landing plates, tugged at the antenna masts, rattled anything that stuck more than a meter above the frozen plane. Sound up there was wide and empty and restless. Then we went down. The shaft was an old magma throat, bored and wired by mining crews before the war. The climb lasted only a few minutes, but that was enough. The further my boots ratcheted down the ladder rungs, the more the world narrowed, until my entire existence was measured by the oval cone of my helmet lamp and the twinge in my lower back every time the suit harness caught. By the time the hatch overhead closed and the last sliver of surface light disappeared, the wind was a memory. In its place, there was only breathing. Mine, the others, the soft mechanical hiss of regulators and the faint tick of suit joints flexing in sequence. Everything else was stone and dark. I had been under enough times that my body accepted this as normal. That acceptance felt dishonest. There is nothing normal about taking a squad of armored humans down into the hollow bones of a frozen planet to chase something that does not want to be found. But habit is its own kind of lie, and the war ran on lies like that. My name is Callan Reese. At the time, I carried the rank of sergeant and the job of making sure we did not get lost or entombed. The others were heavier than me. The breachers carried cutting rigs and portable charge frames. The gunner had a drum-fed rail cannon locked to his harness in case we ran into something the carbines could not budge. Our demolition specialist walked near the middle of the column, burdened with more mass of explosive than any human should have to own. Her name was Leanne. In my HUD, she was a simple tag and a cluster of vital signs. I watched the pulse rate flicker and climb as we dropped away from the surface, then settle into a tight, disciplined rhythm when the ladder ended and we moved into the first horizontal tunnel. She knew I watched. Everyone knew I watched. That was my job. We moved in stacked order, 1 meter between suits, headlamps staggered in brightness so shadows would not conceal too much. The rock here was smooth and glassy, old lava that had cooled fast and cracked slowly over centuries. Under our boots, a dusting of frost. Beyond the cone of light, nothing. The only color came from our own systems. I ran seismic overlay on my visor, a translucent spiderweb of lines showing little micro-tremors in the rock. Most of it was planetary noise, the steady groan of cooling crust. But here and there, deeper down, there were pulses that did not fit the pattern, repeating. Rhythmic but slightly off, like a heartbeat run through damaged speakers. Command called it lattice noise. They wanted coordinates. We carried those orders with us like an extra weight. The first hour was routine. We followed old mining markers attached to the walls, little numbered plaques that meant something to dead accountants. We crossed a collapsed section one by one, hands on the ceiling, boots slipping on loose rubble shoveled by a prior unit. The air was thin and stale and smelled of our own filters. Leanne moved without a word, careful, precise. Her vitals stayed clean. I kept half my attention on the seismic layer, half on the suit icons around me. The pulses below us persisted, somewhere beyond my meaningful resolution. Whatever the enemy had woven into the crust, it was massive and slow, and the rock did its best to pretend it was not there. The neural officer walked near the rear. I never saw his face without a visor. Regulations and habit kept us sealed. He was a slim outline in heavy armor, carrying a case that could not be dropped. His designation was Eamon. The suit painted his status in my peripheral vision, heart steady, stress markers within expected range. For him, this was another field test. For us, it was another descent that might not end with a climb. We reached the first choke point about 90 minutes in. The tunnel narrowed and twisted. The miners had cut through here with small machines and shaped charges, not the big rigs. The walls bent inward, the floor angled, and the ceiling dropped low enough that we had to hunch. My back pulsed warning threads of pain. I acknowledged them and kept moving. Somewhere ahead, rock shifted. It was a tiny thing, a sprinkle of dust from the ceiling, a flutter on the seismic layer like a shrug. The squad leader raised a fist and we stopped. One by one, weapon systems cycled from safe to ready, their icons blooming on my HUD. The first of the enemy came out of the walls. They were not dramatic. No roaring, no rush of color. One moment there was bare stone. The next there were fissures that had not been there before, like cracks blinking open. Limbs slid out, slick with pale residue. Narrow heads with frilled sensory arrays unfolded from slits in the rock. Then they detached, bodies convulsing, and the tunnel filled with moving shapes. Range, 10 meters. Then 7, then 5. The gunner opened up first, rail slugs cracking the confined air into sharp pressure waves that stabbed at my eardrums even through dampening. I fired a half-second later, putting shaped metal through the chest of the nearest creature. It folded silently, legs twitching, viscous material leaking onto the floor where it began to smoke against the frost. Our formation held mostly. The problem came from the middle. Leon's suit blocked my shot angle to the left flank. For half a second, she did not move. Her vital signs spiked, heart rate jumping, respiration hitting the ceiling. Her shoulders twitched, helmet jerking side to side in short, panicked arcs, as if she were trying to find a way out of the stone itself. In that tiny window, two of the creatures reached our line. One scrambled up along the ceiling, limbs finding impossible holds in microcracks. The other lunged low, sliding under the gunner's field of fire. I stepped forward, tried to angle my carbine around her, but she filled the space. My first shot buried itself in the rock by her shoulder, sending shards into the helmet of the man behind her. He swore, a noise reduced by filters to a meaningless vibration. The second shot caught the low-running enemy, but too late. It had already leaped. It hit the squad's point man, claws punching into his chest plate. The two of them went down in a tangle. He fired into it even as they fell, slugs chewing chunks out of its body, but momentum did the damage. I saw his vitals flash red as a limb found a seam and went through. By the time we killed the rest, his breathing was gone. We held position in the cramped tunnel, rock dust still drifting, the air full of metallic tang and the acrid stink of alien fluids. The point man lay half crushed under the bulk of the thing that had killed him. The creature's body twitched for a while, then stopped. We did not move it. In the quiet that followed, I watched Leon's vitals on my visor. They slowly crawled back down from the spike, but never reached baseline. Her breathing stayed fast. The tremor in her hands translated into a soft jitter of the targeting reticle on my HUD. We all saw it. Nobody said anything. There was nothing to say that would fix it down there. We logged the casualty, marked the body for retrieval that would likely never come, and stepped over him one by one. The tunnel took us deeper. After that, the spaces changed. The miners' work ended at a blast door half fused by some old tremor. Our breachers cut through what was left, sending dull vibrations through the stone, and beyond it, the rock was untouched. No plaques, no human scarring. Only natural flows bent later by something else. The floor tilted more. The air grew colder, thin enough that our suits had to work harder. Frost thickened on the walls, interrupted by patches of pale organic matter that had infiltrated microfractures and swollen there, like veins caught mid-growth. The lattice noise in my overlay grew clearer. Instead of vague pulses, there were now distinct lines of activity, all trending toward a single point far below and ahead. The scale of it was wrong. Whatever waited at the terminus was large enough to be a structural feature of the crust, not an infestation. We moved slower. There were fewer ambushes now, fewer patrols of the things in the walls. That, more than anything, told me we were getting close to something important. Leon started to falter again. At first it was small, a pause a little too long and a tight squeeze, a stutter in her breathing as we edged sideways through a gap where rock brushed both shoulders, a hitch in her step when the ceiling dropped low enough that we had to crouch and shuffle. In the abstract, fear that's specific is absurd. The suit's armor rating did not change because the rock narrowed. The structural strength was the same. There was more cover, not less. The enemy could not mass in such tight quarters. On paper, the risk was lower. I could list all those facts. She knew them too. None of them mattered to the part of her brain that remembered stone pressing down, waiting hours for the next rescue drill bit to gnaw through. Her stats climbed and climbed. I watched numbers with one eye and rock with the other, and with each upward tick I felt something twist in my chest. Not anger exactly, not pity either. Something colder, tied to my own understanding of what the war would demand from her and from all of us. We hit the second trigger when we had to go vertical. The tunnel ahead dropped away into a natural shaft, barely wider than a suit. The miners had put in a simple ladder system here, metal rungs hammered into rock, but parts of it were gone. The shaft went down out of my lamp's reach, and the seismic overlay showed stronger lattice noise somewhere below. We anchored a winch line and went one at a time. I went fourth. Enough bodies below to catch me if something failed, enough above that my fall would not be the only problem. My palms were slick inside the gloves despite temperature control, breath loud in my ears as I carefully transferred my weight from rung to rung. Dust fell past my boots, spiraling down to nowhere. Midway down, a sharp clatter echoed from above. I looked up and saw Leanne at the lip, hesitating. Her hands were on the entry rungs, but her limbs did not commit. Her heart rate spiked into the red, then higher. The suit's stress indicators flashed. She did climb eventually, one rung, then another. Her movements were jerky, clipped. The shaft narrowed around her shoulders. On my HUD, her vitals looked like a mountain range. She made it down without falling, but by the time her boots hit the floor, she was shaking hard enough that her muzzle wobbled visibly. I pretended not to see it. The squad leader did not have that luxury. We moved on. Another few hundred meters, another choke point, this one even tighter, barely enough clearance around our chests. We had to turn sideways, scraping armor against rock. The sound was a continuous grind that set my teeth on edge. Halfway through, Leon stopped moving. There was no visible enemy, no immediate hazard. She simply halted, wedged in place, breaths coming in rapid bursts that fogged her visor. The suit tried to compensate, but the numbers kept climbing. She began to thrash, just slightly at first, then harder, shoulders banging against the stone. The whole column behind her compressed, suits bumping. The man directly in front of her caught an elbow to his rebreather pack and swore under his breath. The squad leader's voice cut across the channel, low and flat. Orders, warnings. They did not reach her. Her eyes behind the visor were wild, tracking a point somewhere in the stone inches from her face. I could feel the panic without sharing it. The rock seemed to close in further around all of us. It would not take much, just a wrong stress line, a minor tremor, and the ceiling would come down. Not in a dramatic collapse, just a slow trickle of pebbles becoming a flow, becoming a solid crush. I had been under rock once too, though not like she had. The memory stirred old pain in my back, a phantom weight. The leader called to Amen. The neural officer had to crawl forward along the tunnel, dragging his case, until he wedged in behind her. I saw only fragments in my rear camera. Gloved hands opening ports on her suit, the click of a spinal interface frame locking into place over her back. The case unfolded in the confined space, its display lighting the cramped rock with pale blue. He spoke to her. I saw his helmet dip close to hers, his hand resting on her shoulder to steady her. Whatever he said never reached us. The channel stayed closed. Then there was the long, quiet sound of a syringe being locked into a port, and the sharp, tiny vibration of injection transmitted through the rock. Her vitals went wild for a moment, a spike and then a drop. Heart rate plunged, then stabilized at a lower plateau. Respiration slowed. Stress markers vanished. Her eyes stopped moving. They did not close, they simply fixed on some point ahead, pupils contracting to pinpricks. For a heartbeat, I thought he had killed her. Then she took one long, steady breath. The thrashing stopped. Her limbs settled. Eamon's hands moved swiftly, detaching the interface, sealing the ports. He backed away as far as the tunnel allowed. The squad leader ordered her forward. She obeyed. The difference was immediate. She slid through the rest of the choke point with mechanical precision. No hesitation, no faltering. Her vitals stayed unnaturally flat, like someone had wiped half the graph away. The thing that had been trying to climb out of her chest was gone. In its place, there was a clean, cold blankness. We did not talk about it. There was nowhere to talk about it. The tunnel kept going, and the lattice noise in my visor grew louder. 6 hours from surface insertion, we reached the edge. The tunnel opened without warning. One moment I was pushing through another narrow throat of rock. The next, my boots found the lip of a ledge and the floor disappeared beyond. I stopped dead. My lamp spilled into emptiness, swallowed by distance. The others crowded behind me until the squad leader pushed forward to see. The abyss swallowed our lights, but not entirely. There was illumination already in that space, a dim, ghostly radiance that came from below and from the walls themselves. The chasm was vast. It stretched laterally beyond the range of my sensors, a wound carved into the planet's bones. Its walls were not bare rock. They were threaded with strands of living tissue anchored deep into fissures, glowing faintly with their own pale light. The strands crossed and recrossed, forming a lattice that wrapped the entire void in a three-dimensional web. In the spaces between those strands floated shapes, spherical, ovoid, clustered. Some were still, others pulsed slowly, expanding and contracting as if they were breathing. Smaller, more mobile organisms moved along the strands, tending to the hanging pods, adjusting their positions. The whole structure was in motion, but on a timescale that made it easy to miss if you did not watch long enough. My seismic overlay went mad. Every line pointed here. Every pulse I had seen above originated from this place. The squad spread out along the ledge, boots anchored magnetically to the rock. We moved slowly, weapons up, eyes wide behind visors. It felt obscene to make any sound at all, as if noise would draw the attention of something so large it could not be seen as a single entity. In the far depths of the chasm, something moved that was not part of the static lattice. A mass, vast and slow, crawled along one of the thicker strands near the lower levels. It was not like the smaller tunnel hunters we had fought. This thing was a carrier, its body segmented, each segment bulging with stored mass. As it moved, portions of its underside distended and new pods extruded, attaching themselves to the lattice with tendrils. Behind it, the glow of the tissue brightened fractionally, as if it were responding with satisfaction. This was not infestation. This was architecture. The realization settled into me with a weight far heavier than any rock. The repetition in the structure, the efficiency, the way every strand and pod and carrier moved within predictable parameters, it all pointed to design, not accident. This was a template being executed. Somewhere above or beyond this world, something had decided that this planet would host this lattice, and now the instructions were being followed. If not here, then somewhere else. If we burned this one, others would grow. Our orders did not change because of any of that. Orders rarely did. We had to tag the core. The squad leader distributed beacon charges along the ledge. I took 2. Their weight pulled at my harness as I quipped them on. I switched my mapping system to full record, sweeping my visor across the chasm, trying to capture as much as possible. The data appended itself to our mission package, a growing block of evidence that might convince someone above my pay grade that this was more than a local problem. There was no direct path to the central nexus. The ledge ran along one side of the chasm for maybe 80 meters, then broke up into irregular shelves and outcrops. Below, the lattice strands crisscrossed in tangled layers. Crossing them would mean stepping onto living alien infrastructure and trusting it not to move. We did not trust it. Instead, we traversed the ledge, placing beacons at points where the rock interfaced with the densest concentrations of strands. Each charge locked in with a magnetic snap and a faint green blink. Enough of them, and the targeting computers in orbit could unroll a kinetic solution that would punch through the crust and collapse most of the void. Comms were gone by then. Our uplink relay had died 2 levels above during a minor rockfall. The mission package was trapped with us. The only way it would reach a ship was if one of us carried it back. The enemy did not ignore us. They came in small groups at first, emerging from holes in the rock above and below the ledge. The tunnel hunters were thinner here, their bodies adapted to cling to the lattice strands. They moved with unnerving silence, their sensory frills extended to taste the vibrations of our boots. Our first engagement in the chasm was controlled. Short bursts, well-placed shots. Enemies fell and slid off the ledge into the abyss, vanishing into the web below. We held formation, adjusting arcs, conserving ammunition. Then a carrier noticed us. It was not the huge one far below that remained focused on its work. This one was smaller, a juvenile or a variation, anchored to the wall about 20 meters beneath our ledge. It turned a cluster of sensory structures toward us, tasting the air. The glow along its side intensified. It opened. A hatch, or something like one, irised along its flank. A stream of smaller organisms poured out, each about the size of my torso, limbs tucked tight. They dropped from the carrier and caught onto the lattice strands with hooked appendages, then angled upward toward us in a loose swarm. The squad leader gave a single hand signal, and we spread along the rock, taking firing positions. There was nowhere else to go. The ledge was a thin margin between the wall and the drop, and behind us was the tunnel that had brought us here, now partially blocked by debris from micro-collapses we had triggered ourselves. We fired into the swarm. The creatures reacted. Those in the front ranks died quickly, bodies shredding under rail slugs, ichor spraying into the cold air. The ones behind shifted, adjusting course, climbing in arcs that took them away from the center of our fire. The lattice itself began to vibrate, reacting to their movement, strands thrumming with energy. Leanne was on my left, maybe 3 meters away, her boots locked into the rock at an angle, her carbine tracking targets with inhuman steadiness. There was no tremor now, no hesitation. Her vitals and my HUD were dead flat. Heart and respiration held at a controlled, almost artificial level. She killed efficiently. Each squeeze of the trigger placed a slug exactly where it needed to go. No wasted rounds, no double taps. She stepped along the ledge with the casual certainty of someone walking across a training floor, not the lip of an abyss. Part of me was grateful. Part of me could not stop watching the emptiness in her telemetry and wondering what had been carved out to make room for that performance. The swarm reached us anyway. No amount of precision fire can stop a mass that is willing to absorb casualties. The creatures closed the last meters in small groups, lunging from lattice to rock. One hit the gunner full on, its limbs wrapping around his weapon. He staggered, slammed his back into the wall, and kept firing with his offhand muzzle pressed into its carapace until it stopped moving. Another landed near my boots, claws tearing at the magnetic locks. I stamped down, feeling the shock transmit through my legs. It latched onto my shin and began to climb. I bent, shoved the muzzle of my carbine into the gap between its plates, and fired a 3-round burst. The recoil battered my wrist. The creature fell, dragging a piece of my armor with it, and tumbled into the chasm. Something hit Leon. It came from below, a blur of pale limbs and black hooks launched from a strand with elastic force. It struck her midsection, the impact knocking one of her boots loose from the rock. For an instant, she teetered at the edge, one leg anchored, the other hanging over emptiness. Before any of us could reach for her, she chose. She released the second magnet. She stepped off the ledge. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then, her suit thrusters fired, small maneuvering jets flaring along her thighs and back. She dropped in a controlled arc, landing on a thick lattice strand maybe 6 meters below. The living cable flexed under her weight, the creature still attached to her chest. She did not scream. She did not call for help. She simply drove her knee into its underside, freed one arm, and rammed a knife blade between its plates. It spasmed and went limp. She stood on the living bridge between alien structures, boots magnetized to something that pulsed. Around her, other creatures scrambled along the strands, closing in. She did not look up at us. Her vitals remained flat. The squad leader tried to signal her. She did not respond. From my vantage point, I could see her helmet turn toward the central mass of the lattice. The larger carrier organism below shifted, sensory frills twitching. The glow in its tissues intensified again, as if in recognition of her presence. For a moment, I thought she would start running toward it across the strands, a lone human moving across the enemy's nervous system. Then the rock beneath my own boots shuddered. Seismic spike, not from the lattice, from above. The overlay on my visor flashed new readings. Something had struck the crust overhead, a deep, low-frequency impact that rolled through the planet's bones, shaking dust from the ceiling of the chasm. A second later, another tremor, closer. Someone had gotten our data. Someone had fired. The orbital strike was coming in. Beacons along the ledge pulsed brighter as they synchronized with the incoming solution. The air in the chasm seemed to tighten, particles suspended, waiting. The squad leader gave a final order: fall back. There was nowhere to fall back to that would guarantee survival, but any rock between us and the central void was better than none. We began to move toward the tunnel mouth, firing in short bursts to keep the nearest creatures from swarming us completely. I hesitated, looking down. Leanne remained on the lattice strand, barely more than a human-shaped silhouette against the glow. She stood facing the central depths, weapon lowered, as if waiting to see what would happen when the sky fell. I could have called to her. The channel was still technically open, but there were no words that would cross the gap between who she had been and what the neural cut had made of her. The first kinetic rod hit somewhere above and behind us. The impact was not sharp. It was a vast, slow sound, a low groan that built and built as the rod pushed through kilometers of crust, melting and shattering rock in its passage. The chasm lit up from within as pressure waves tore through the lattice, making every strand vibrate in wild, out-of-phase motion. The ledge cracked under my boots. I ran. Stone split in long, jagged lines. Sections of the wall sheared away, carrying beacons and bodies into the void. The lattice writhed like a living thing in pain, strands snapping, pods bursting in sprays of glowing fluid. Carrier organisms tore loose from their anchors and fell, their bulk smashing through lower levels. The squad scattered, sprinting for the tunnel, slipping on shaking rock. The gunner fell. 2 others dragged him upright, boots scraping. Debris rained from above. Chunks of stone, shards of biostructure, fragments of what had been the enemy's core. I reached the tunnel mouth as the second rod hit. This one was closer. The shock wave hit like a physical blow. The tunnel ceiling ahead of me collapsed, filling the passage with a wall of rock dust and rubble. I threw myself sideways on instinct, my suit amplifiers screaming warnings, and went down. The world became a spinning cascade of impacts, each one a separate flash of pain in my back, my ribs, my head. Then everything stopped moving. For a long time, I lay in darkness, I could hear nothing beyond the ring in my own ears and the distant, muffled rumble of the planet settling into its new wounds. My HUD flickered, rebooted, and came back in degraded mode. Half my sensor suite was gone. My left arm did not want to respond. My back pain had become a solid bar of fire from neck to pelvis. I tried to move and could not. For a moment, I thought I had been pinned under rock. Panic rose in my chest, sudden and hot. I forced it down, tested my limbs again, and realized I was only tangled in my own harness and a web of smaller debris. Nothing above me was crushing. It only felt that way. I worked my free arm up slowly, pushing loose rock aside. Each movement sent sparks through my spine. Eventually, my elbow found open air. I used that leverage to drag myself sideways, centimeter by centimeter, until my torso slid free. My lower body followed with a grinding, reluctant motion. When I finally sat up, my vision blurred and cleared in pulses. The tunnel behind me was sealed by a mass of rock and fused alien tissue. The chasm beyond the ledge was a collapsing chaos of falling strands and debris. Dust filled the air, turning every beam of my lamp into a solid bar of light. I checked my squad icons. Most of them were gone. A few persisted, flickering, then vanished one by one as suit systems died. 2 remained steady. One was the gunner, somewhere beyond the wall of rock, his signal trapped. The other was Eamon, the neural officer, buried deeper in the tunnel. Leon's icon was not there. She had been on the lattice when the strike hit. If she had survived the initial shock, she would have been caught in the implosion of the structure as the rods shattered the central supports. There was nowhere for her to have gone. I sat there on the broken ledge, shoulders against the rock, breathing hard, and tried to imagine what it had been like from her vantage point. Standing on the living bridge, looking into the heart of the enemy, as the world above finally remembered we were down there and dropped a hammer through the crust. Maybe she had felt nothing. The cut in her had taken fear and left only obedience. Or maybe, in that final instant, some fragment of the old panic had returned and overflowed the blankness. I would never know. The war did not waste effort on questions like that. My suit pinged me with a warning about oxygen reserves. The impact had damaged my filters and cracked one of the canisters. I had hours, not a day. The nearest functioning relay was back up the tunnel, buried now. No one knew exactly where I was. I uploaded the mission package anyway. The suit's emergency antenna extended from my shoulder, a thin, fragile mass that had no right to work under so much rock. I tasked it with a blind burst, a dumb broadcast aimed roughly toward orbit. High energy, high risk. It might cook what was left of my systems. It might do nothing at all. The burst fired. My HUD spat static, went black, then came back in even more crippled mode. The antenna burned out. If the data made it through, it was done. If not, there would be no second attempt. After that, there was nothing to do but sit and wait. Time in the dark is different. It stretches in ways surface time does not. Each breath becomes an individual event. Each pain spike finds its own lane and runs along it. My back hurt. My lungs ached with every inhale. Dust settled slowly on my armor, coating me in a thin, gritty layer that made every joint feel heavier. I thought about the lattice, the carriers, the pods suspended in their hundreds, the way they had all moved in coordination, executing a pattern that did not originate here. We would fight more of them, on other worlds, in other tunnels, under different skies. Every time we collapsed one of those chasms, another would open somewhere else. The war was not about territory, it was about templates. I thought about the neural cut. Amon had been evacuated eventually, I learned later. The gunner died where he lay. Leon's file never included a body. She became a name on a list, a designation on a memorial wall, and a footnote in a classified after-action report that described her performance in the chasm in carefully neutral language. None of those documents mention the way she looked, standing on the edge of the abyss before the intervention, hands shaking just enough to make her weapon wobble. None of them mention the sound of her breathing in the choke point when it broke into short, animal gasps. Official history rarely bothers with the shape of fear. My own deposition came years later, when the patterns in the lattice we had recorded were matched to structures found on 3 other worlds. Someone in an office far from any tunnel wanted to understand how we first recognized the template. I sat in a chair designed for comfort I did not need, in a room that smelled like polished plastic and recirculated air, and spoke into a recorder. They told me not to worry about accuracy of details. The data was all archived. What they wanted was the human framing. I told them about the descent, about the point man dying in the first ambush, about the vertical shaft and the choke point in the intervention. I described the chasm in terms that tried and failed to convey its scale. I told them exactly how the lattice glowed, how the carriers moved, how the strike felt when it hit. When they asked about the specialist, I kept my answers short. Yes, there was a field-level neural intervention. Yes, it appeared to stabilize her performance. Yes, she acted decisively in the final engagement. Yes, she died. They asked if I thought the intervention was justified. I said it was necessary for the mission. They seemed satisfied with that. What I did not tell them was that I still dream about that moment on the ledge, when she stepped off into the void with a kind of calm I have never known. No hesitation, no flinch. As if the lattice and the abyss and the enemy were less important than the simple fact that there was a gap to cross, and she had the tools to cross it. In the dreams, I am the one she leaves behind on the rock. I feel her fear enter me like a transfer of mass, a simple redistribution. She walks out of it lighter. I stand on the ledge heavier. When the strike hits, it is my legs that refuse to move. I wake in a bed that does not shake, in a building that was never part of a mine, with clean air in my lungs and a back that still remembers rock. Outside, the war continues in other systems. New missions, new lattices, new templates. Somewhere, other squads descend into other tunnels, following orders written by people who read my report and decided it was worth repeating. I am not part of those squads. My lungs will not let me suit up again. My spine complains when I climb stairs. My contribution is a set of files and a name on a roster, and the memory of one chasm on one frozen world. When I close my eyes, I see it again. The ledge under my boots, the abyss swallowing our light, the pale strands of the lattice pulsing with borrowed life, the carrier moving along its track, extruding new pods into the web, and her, standing on the living strand, weight balanced, carbine at her side, visor reflecting the glow, no tremor, no ragged breath, fear cut away, discarded like spoiled tissue. She turns her helmet just slightly toward the depths, as if listening to something I cannot hear. Then the world shudders, and the image freezes there just before everything breaks. I think that is what I will carry with me until my own systems fail. Not the impact, not the collapse, not the victory, if that is what they call it. Just that one still frame of a soldier on a bridge made of a living enemy, standing between a human war and a template that came from somewhere in the dark, unafraid because we made her that way. The end. There's nothing more to process. No signals, no alerts, no follow-ups, just quiet, steady rest.